All right. How you guys doing? So today I want to go through sensation and perception, which is chapter 5. I also want to go through chapter 6 and 7. Let's see if we make it. I like this book because the biopsychology chapter in chapter 3 gives you the biological basis. You know, it explains endocrine function a little bit. You get what hormones are, what neurotransmitters are, how they work slow and how they work fast. You know, the slow system would be the endocrine system, hormones. You exercise more, you start to get a lot more of these happy hormones into the system, and they will slowly change things for the positive. They change the body. They also change your general mood, and that's a hormonal change. And then when you think about neurotransmission, that's the quick change. That's the one that happens immediately. And some of these things will happen so immediately that the spinal cord actually makes the decision for you. You have a doctor check your reflex by hitting your knee with a hammer, and if that muscle stretch response happens, then you know that's it's working. I haven't seen a doctor test that except for like in cartoons these days, but you know that sometimes the decision comes directly from the spinal cord. So we talked about just kind of the mechanics of everything, and then we moved up a level to try to make sense of everything from the perspective of states of consciousness, full-on states of consciousness, like sleeping, wakefulness, meditation, and we looked at the effects of drugs for kind of a long time, and that's why we're behind a little bit, but I think people are not very honest about drugs, and I really wanted to tell you a lot about that. So if you missed that lecture, please do check it out. I think that one's important. Sometimes, you know, somebody will be asleep and not able to wake up, and you know somebody in the room says, "I'm taking this person to the hospital. I don't care what the consequences are," and that ends up going well for the person. I've taken people to the hospital. Sometimes it's the right thing to do. Okay, so we're going to talk today about sensation and perception. And sensation and perception, normally people think that they're kind of the same thing. Like, try to think in your mind, what do you think sensation is and what is perception? What do you think the difference between them are? Plato, the philosopher, talked about how the senses lie, and the world that we see is not the world that is real. And we're going to talk about optical illusions, and you'll see that even he could see that if you stick a straight stick into the water, it looks like it bends in the water. It doesn't actually bend. It's our senses giving us information that's not correct. You know, we see that kind of thing happen all the time. So what's the difference between sensation and perception? Well, sensation would be information going into the sense gateways. And for Buddhist philosophy, you have 6. You know, you have sight, sound, smell, taste, and body sensation. We will find more described here, right? See, this is making sense of all of the sensations on a street. We'll find that in order for sensation to get to perception, a lot of reduction has to happen, a lot of rendering. So you have a lot of information coming in through your eyes, through your ears, through your nose, mouth, and body, right? But how can you make sense of all of it at once? Here's the augmented Abhidharma here. You have sensory receptors, right? They're all throughout the body. We're going to talk about each of them specifically. Sensation occurs when the receptors detect stimuli, right? And then here we have sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. But then there are some more. There's the vestibular sense, and that's the sense of the vestibule inside of the inner ear. Proprioception, you can get that by feeling gravity pull on an arm, but you also talk to the inner ear about that. Movement, kinesthesia, this thing is involved too, because if your head is moving forward, you can feel the acceleration. When you're running, and then you start slowing down, you can feel yourself slowing down. And that's because gravity pulls on these little pieces of rice. They look like little tiny pieces of rice. Gravity or force will be pulling on that piece of rice. And then there are little stretch receptors that will measure how hard it's pulling on there. So when you spin the head or turn or something like that, you can feel the position of your head very easily, right? Pain and temperature are usually the same sort of a system. Okay, so how do we make sense of all of this information coming in at the same time? You have to choose some things. Did you watch The Monkey Business Illusion yet? I hope that you did. The interesting thing about that, spoiler alert, so if you didn't watch it yet, there should be a link in the Google Classroom. Click on The Monkey Business Illusion. I'm going to make sure that it's there. Okay, so go back and see it. 3, 2, 1. Spoiler. So you're supposed to count the passes between the players on one of these teams. Do you notice the gorilla walking by and beating his chest? Some people don't notice the gorilla, and they're very surprised by that. If you already knew the gorilla was coming, in the end you find out that the curtain behind them changed color and that one of the players left the game. Did you notice these things too? Very few people will count the right number of passes, notice the gorilla, notice the player leaving the game, and notice the color of the curtain behind them changing color. Right? Very few people notice all of those things. It's not good or bad to notice all of these things, because focusing and concentration requires deleting some stuff, turning some other stuff off, right? If you look at my computer, I have just so many windows open at all the time, and the brain can be like that in a lot of ways. Sometimes you have to just shut some things down and try to focus. The author Nicholas Carr wrote a book called The Shallows, and it's about how our modern technological environment has all these bing, ding, 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 ding. Things are capturing our attention constantly. And so we think that we're multitasking all the time, and we think that it's making us better at multitasking. But what he found in the book, this is a big reveal in the book, is that even people who are multitasking all the time, who think that they're really good at multitasking, when they're given these 6 tests of cognitive ability, tests that see how powerful your mind is, they do worse. The heavy multitaskers, people who are always moving between tasks, they do worse than people who are single taskers. They're people who will read something for a long period of time, write something for a long period of time, play instruments for a long period of time without interruption, right? And I don't know if you can argue that gaming for long periods of time is something that has benefits, but I'm sure that there are researchers that will oblige you, and they will prove that gaming has great benefits, and it can increase, give you the benefits of single tasking. But I doubt it. And the reason I doubt it is because when you're reading a book or even watching a film or something like that, you're using your imagination in order to render the environment. But if you're playing a modern game, like the games that are cool now, the level of virtual reality is so good that you don't have to do any imagination at all. Like, all of the imagination is being done for you. And so it's a very passive experience, even though you are being active in the game. I'm thinking that might be, even if it is something that could count as single tasking, a single task focus sort of a thing, I think it would probably be like the lowest quality single tasking that you could be doing, even if it's still single tasking, right? Okay, so multitaskers, Nicholas Carr will tell you, they perform bad on every cognitive test, every test of mind power, including tasks that measure your ability to multitask, right? So even multitasking is negatively affected by constantly multitasking, right? So one of the things that's good about selective attention not paying attention to this, not paying attention to that, not paying attention to that. I don't see these things. They don't exist in my mind. That's a superpower because you could focus on a single thing. I had a good friend when I moved out west. I lived with a husband and wife on an island, and they had a big, beautiful house. They had extra bedrooms, and we were all in a band together, and he was the keyboard player. He had a room full of keyboards. It was so amazing. But they invited us out to live with them. From Boring, Ohio, we went out to the islands north of Seattle, Washington. It was really beautiful. And there was just a bunch of us running around like gorillas in this big, beautiful house. We would just be in the big living room, like laughing and joking and cooking and making a bunch of noise and just being crazy. And my keyboard player's wife was, she had this like really amazing ability to just shut the world off and work. And I would like say something to her like she's in the conversation, and she'd be like, "What?" And she'd be like, "Sorry, I'm tuning you guys out." And she was really wonderful. She wasn't like, "You guys are a bunch of jerks and you're distracting me." She's like not able to get distracted because she could just turn off the entire world and get to work. I can't do that at all. Like I can't do that at all. If there's stuff going on, like my attentional focus will immediately go to that. And I mean, that's also not a bad thing. If you are constantly flitting to the next idea, there are ways to leverage that to positive things, right? Like improvisation is something that's a really good skill if you can use it. And the same thing is like, if you're not good at improvising all the time, you probably have this selective attentional ability where you can shut things off and you can focus on one thing for a long period of time. If you do have that superpower, you can get it. Off topic, kinda. I'm reading a book by Martin Seligman. I think he was the president of APA for a little while. He studied learned helplessness. That was a thing he discovered. We'll talk about that later probably. But he was studying psychology as a means of healing people who are mentally sick, the mental sickness, mental illness, healing those things. And he became critical of the fact that like psychology seemed to only be focused on healing suffering, and it didn't have anything to say to people who were like, my life is pretty good, like I don't have a mental illness. My life is pretty good. I mean, my life is not perfect, and I'm sad sometimes and everything like that. But like, what does this science of the soul say about like what it is to be a human being? What are the fundamentals of being a human being? That's why I like the way this book is set up, talking about like, all the basics first before we get into mental illness. Because psychology is so focused on mental illness, rightly so. Like it's good to heal people, help people. But he said, what about people who want to live a good life and they're like, I want my life to be amazing. Can your psychological science make my life amazing? And so I just got one of his books. It's called Authentic Happiness, and it's not like real self-help book because he's like a legit psychologist. And it's one of the things he's saying in the beginning is it's not a good idea to just try to fix the things that are wrong with you because we're all different. We just are different. Some people find that they're not good at this, but they're really good at that. Like, I personally don't like to do administrative tasks. Like, if you ask me to like manage the schedule for all the teachers in my department, I don't want to do that at all. If you ask me to like look at the self-evaluations that all of the teachers have turned in and decide I don't want to do any of that stuff. I love teaching. Teaching is really awesome. It gives me that like fire. There's a lot of academics who are like, I'm tired of teaching. I'm burnt out on that. I just want to run things. I want to manage things. And that's awesome. Like, it's really good that we all have different desires and different skills. You should find what yours are. And it's also important to know what your weaknesses are, but Once you know what your weaknesses are, call your friends, man. Like you have friends who are strong where you are weak. And you just call them and you talk to them and you start a startup company together and you say, hey, you handle this stuff, I'll handle this stuff. And then you realize, man, we're a really good team. That's the good stuff. So hopefully you can figure out how to do that through this. Okay. So selective attention is necessary in order to get anything done. And some of these meditation teachers that I run into, they go about saying stuff like, putting your attention on the right thing is living a good life. And that's it. That's like the shortest definition of living a good life. If you're putting your attention on things that don't matter, or things that don't help you, or things that don't help the people that you love, if you're putting your attention on those things, you're wasting your life. It's pretty short, it's pretty easy. And the opposite is true. If you're putting your attention on things that help your life, make your life better, make life better for the people that you love, you're living a good life, So that's the short version. You can decide if you believe that. All right, so let's dig into sensation as opposed to perception. The absolute threshold is what it takes to make one of these little specialized systems fire. There's an idea that you can detect a candle 30 miles away. In silence, you can hear a tiny little sound in silence, but and you know this if you ever try to open a door while people are sleeping. But you can also get action potentials that happen under the level of consciousness. These are called subliminal messages. There's a lot of hype about subliminal advertising, but it doesn't appear that subliminal advertising, even though it was wildly outlawed, people are really scared of it. But people don't. The research just doesn't show that it works very well, so you don't really need to be scared of that. I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg has something way scarier than the subliminal messages that they came up with almost 100 years ago. But if you're interested in those, we can talk about them in the class. JND is interesting because I think there are some psychological laws, like things that are true of all people all the time that have emerged from studying JND. JND is just noticeable difference. And that's like basically saying, if we're in a situation of this much brightness, you can detect a difference in the brightness to this much. And you know this because we have all these programs for making visual art and stuff. You have a volume slider on your computer. Like if you just turn the volume just a little bit, can you even tell the difference? Not really. Okay, a little bit more. Same with brightness. Can you tell the difference between brightness here or brightness there? If you're making a YouTube thumbnail, like the font size goes up by one little tick, can you even really tell the difference? Not really, So just noticeable difference means that's the smallest difference that you can tell. They do this with touch too. They'll take like little points of scissors and they'll stick them on your fingertip and be like, hey, can you tell do you feel 1 point or 2? 2. Do you feel 1 point or 2? 2. Do you feel 1 point or 2? 1. And that's the point where like now you can't tell the difference between 1 point and 2. And then if you do it on the back of the neck, there's not a lot of sense receptors there. So if you have 2 points on the back of the neck, even if they're kind of far apart, you can't tell the difference, right? Because the touch receptors are spread out on the skin, not equally. Some areas are more sensitive. Where do you want to get your coronavirus vaccine? Do you want to get it in the arm or do you want to get it in your lip? Like you don't want to get it in the lip. You'd rather get it in the arm because it doesn't hurt, right? Yeah. So that's just noticeable difference. And the movie theater one is interesting. That's why you don't play with your phone in the movie theater. We'll talk about this with hearing too. Bottom up and top down is pretty interesting because it talks about how your expectations will change what you actually perceive, right? We're on to perception now. So what's the difference between perception and sensation? Sensation is information coming into the system, and that's kind of at the sensory level, at the level of the sense organ. Perception is the experience. Like, what does it feel like to be perceiving this thing? Like, imagine you are you're out on the beach. It's really hot. You go into your hotel room. You turn on the shower. The water is pretty cold. I don't know Celsius very well. Let me think. How about it's the water's 25 degrees, and you put that on, and you're like, oh man, that feels really good. It feels really cold, right? Or let's say the water's even 27 degrees. Fine. And you're like, oh, that's some cold water. Yeah, wow, that feels really good. But if you're somewhere cold and then you go into the cold water, it feels different. Like they're able to do this with hands, and you can feel this. You have like a bucket of water in front of you, and then you put your right hand in hot water, and you put your left hand in cold water. And then you have the same bucket of water right in front of you. And then you take your right hand out of the hot water, you take your left hand out of the cold water, and you put them both in the same bucket of water. Your right hand, of course, feels like, wow, this is some really cold water. And your left hand feels like, wow, this is some really hot water. And it's not like that you get the sense, oh, well, it feels like it's this. It really does feel like it's that. Like the same water feels hot to the left hand and cold to the right hand, right? So the senses kind of lie. The difference between bottom up and top down, it's not like bottom is the body and top is the mind. It's kind of like that. Top is like executive function. Top is usually like, I know that there's a bunch of noise and everything, but I'm using executive function in order to focus on this one thing, right? I'm focusing my attention on this one thing, right? That's kind of a top-down action. But bang, I hear a really loud noise that comes in through sensation and it captures my attention. That's a bottom-up capture of attention. Another thing that you can do is if you expect to see something, like they give the idea in the book of looking for your keys, and one of your keys is yellow. So you're looking around and you're like, yellow keys, yellow keys, yellow keys, yellow keys, yellow keys, yellow keys. You're looking around everywhere, and you're kind of like opening perception up to feel yellow. And he says you don't look on the ceiling. No, you're looking around for keys, and you're kind of like deleting everything else. But bottom up is the situation where something kind of grabs you and captures your attention. Top down and bottom up is something that's constantly discussed in sensation, perception, and in psychology in general. Okay. So factors affecting perception, adaptation, olfactory adaptation is really funny. I used to when I was a kid, I'd be hanging out with my friends and we'd end up like a bunch of dudes in a room with a TV playing games and eating gross snacks and just being like generally like disgusting young men for a while. And you leave that room to go to the bathroom, and then you go back into the room and you smell how bad everybody smells, and you're like, I can't believe I was like living in this with all of these other stinky people and I didn't realize how stinky it was. Well, it's because olfactory adaptation is really fast. And that's funny, but gas leaks are pretty scary because like sometimes a gas can be in your house that can kill you, and if you don't smell it, you're in trouble. And olfactory adaptation really doesn't help for that. But if you have to do kind of a gross job and you're working around some garbage, you just wait 30 seconds and then the smell starts to go away because olfactory senses, like a sense that's been around for a little while, it's like you don't have to think about that so much anymore because that's been here for a while and you didn't do anything about it. So like the main computer of your brain just kind of turns that sense down. Also, you don't feel your pants. You don't feel your shirt, right? Until I say, feel your shirt. You don't feel your shoes. You don't feel the ground against your feet. You don't feel the seat against your butt. You don't feel a lot of these things because they're not important until you think about it. If I say, pay attention to your tongue, feel your tongue. Oh, wow, what is it doing? Is it laying flat in your mouth? Is it near your teeth? Can you feel your teeth on the edges of your tongue? Right? Just pay attention to the feeling of having a tongue. Isn't that interesting? Do you ever pay attention to the feeling of having a tongue? No, you don't. Not really, right? So it's pretty interesting. There's a lot of information coming in all the time that we just don't pay attention to because it's not salient. This is not a word that they use, but salient, S-A-L-I-E-N-T, salient, and the miquam verb noun is salience. It's like the things that jump out to you. And you can feel this if you walk through the mall, where for me, if I'm walking around and I see a music shop, that jumps out to me. But then I see a bunch of clothing shops and I don't care. It's not every other store in the mall, I don't care. I just want coffee and music. Those are the things in the mall that make me happy. So inattentional blindness is like the monkey business illusion. It's where you see something, you fail to see something because you're not paying attention to it, because you're focusing your attention on other things. And that's what we need to do. By not paying attention to something, you free yourself up to pay attention to something. A lot of things in your life, when you refuse to engage with them, it's a positive thing, right? So this is signal detection theory. This basically is like the salience situation. Western people are more susceptible to these line illusions. Here's one of them, right? Look at A. I'm sure you've seen these before, but be honest. You know that the context of the blue lines makes you feel like they're not equal, but they are equal, right? And now I wonder if it'd be cool if the slide came apart, but I don't think it does. And then if you could see without the blue, you'd see that these lines are equal. And then you look at the context over here of the house. If you look at these, you would see that these lines are equal, right? But it's the context. The context makes it look like it is, they're the same length. Wavelength is literally the length of a wave. And this has to do with sight and hearing, which is we're picking up information about objects that are far away. They're sending information to us by vibrating the air in certain waves, or light is entering our eyes, and that light is coming in certain waves. And those waves we see as color, right? I'm not going to dig deep into this because I know that many of you are excellent when it comes to optics, when it comes to these just basically the construction of light and optics in general that we've been deep into ever since Newton. But this is the visual light spectrum, and then gamma rays are way, way faster. Radio waves are way, way slower. We can't see any of that. All we see here is the visible light spectrum. Red, violet, so the frequency of the light depends on the color, right? We see color based on the speed of the light. We know that the universe is expanding because of the red shift, right? Okay. So it is empirical information about the world. Red, the difference between red and violet is important. And so infrared and ultraviolet just talk about where these lights leave the visual spectrum. Okay. So sound waves, pitch, we are perceiving sound in hertz, right? The middle A of a piano is 440 cycles per second, or hertz. And that's not the way music always was. It's a recent standardization. If you go back to the Baroque era of music, it was 432. But now you can change it if you want, for sure. But now most piano tuners will tune your A to 440, the A somewhere in the middle of the keyboard. And so that's why like my A and your A are going to be the same A. It's because A is 440, right? But some people will make music other ways. You can tune to something else. You can tune your A to something else, and then your whole scale is in a different place, and it won't sound normal with other music. But there are theories that say that 432, eight cycles per second lower, which is it would be hard to notice the difference. Is like better healing vibration for the human body or something. I like that idea. Okay, so frequency is the pitch, higher or lower, and then amplitude is how loud something is. It talks about the ability to hurt your ears. I have definitely hurt my ears. I used to play with a drummer, and he was, he's like 2 meters tall, really strong, had really perfect control over his technique. So he just hit the drums so loud. We'd be setting up, and the first thing that the sound guy always wants to hear is your snare as loud as it goes. And we all have monitors. That's like a personal speaker for you. So the sound guy would quietly talk to the drummer in the monitor, snare, please. And then he would just start banging on the snare, and we'd all be like, where did that come from? It would be really scary. So we told him after a little while, we're like, hey man, especially if you have in-ears, like we don't hear the sound guy calling for you to hit your snare as loud as you can. But that's the first part of a drummer's sound check, is hit the snare as loud as you can. So he'd be like, guys, I'm gonna hit my snare. We'd be like, thank you. And then we'd start like this, and then the loud sound would start, and then we'd slowly let your ears out. I have a lot of hearing loss from playing music, but part of the reasons we're gonna get into the I'll just show you right now, and we'll come back to vision. Yeah, this. So the tympanic membrane is like an ear drum, and it really is like a drum head. It's stretched tight. And if you're watching a horror movie and everything goes silent, then the tympanic membrane gets stretched really tight, and it loosens up, and it's ready to accept more sound. It's ready to accept sound because it's like, oh, there's no sound. And so the sensation tries to go out and look for more, like, where's sound? There's no sound. This is weird. And that's why those float tanks, sensory deprivation tanks, they're called, where you lay in water that's it's a temperature that you don't feel. You don't feel yourself in gravity because you're floating. You don't touch anything because you're in this salt water that makes you float. You don't hear anything because your ears are blocked. You don't see anything because you're blindfolded and it's dark. Olfactory adaptation happens really quickly. Hopefully you've brushed your teeth and you don't have a bad taste in your mouth. And then you have no sensation. You're being sensory deprived. And then what the perceptual apparatus will do is search for sensations, expanding, finding nothing but nothingness, and then searching deeper, expanding, finding nothing, searching further, expanding, finding nothing, so that the self is this big, expansive seeking and just finding nothing. So you just float in the nothingness. I really want to do it, but I don't have time. I've never done it before, but I'd really like to do it. It sounds really cool. So sound is like this. You're receiving no sound, and then the muscles will relax to try to receive more things, so that anything that's hitting the membrane will create kind of a more powerful vibration. And when it relaxes, and then all of a sudden that jump scare in the movie happens when the ghost comes out. It's like, whee! You get that like high frequency sound. It hits your ears because your ears have been like trying to hear something. Like, hey, there's nothing. I want to hear something. Come on. And then bang, you get hit by this. It's physiological. So basically, like, I do this in class all the time. I'll take my microphone and I'll stand up on something and I'll be like, all right, I'm about to drop this microphone on the ground. You ready? And I get ready, and everybody's bodies tense up, like, oh no, here it comes. And like, you can feel that in your ears. Your tympanic membrane is being stretched so that when the sound wave is going to hit it, it's not going to damage your ability to hear. But when my drummer would like bang, 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 just start hitting that snare drum super loud, and it comes just out of nowhere, we'd be really, really, surprised by that. And it really, gives you a lot of hearing loss. All right, so I'm going to go back to vision. Okay, so the anatomy of the visual system. Check out E.J. Chichinilsky. I can't say his name right, but he's that guy from Stanford who's coming up with an artificial retina. The retina is the thing in the back of the eye that articulates with the optic nerve. Interneurons and then the optic nerve. His idea is if you articulate with that thing, you're articulating directly from the brain. He's trying to give sight to the brain, give sight to the blind people, kind of the way that cochlear implants give hearing to deaf people. Okay, so the blind spot is very interesting. Remind me in the live session, and we'll look for the blind spot. That's pretty cool. Basically, like all the axons of the nerves that are in the retina, they all leave the back of the eye in the same spot, and so there can be no photoreceptors there. So there's a place in your eye where you're not receiving anything. And basically, like if I shut this eye, there's a part of my visual field that I can't see. But of course, you don't know that because your mind, perceptively, your mind will more. And my hand is not as big as it is. It's a tiny little thing, right? So there's a thing we can do where you look at a point, and then there's an X over here. And if you go like this, and you move forward and back, the X is going to disappear. And it's the same for this side, right? It's kind of on the outside right there. But since you have two eyes, they kind of make up for it. And also, your visual processor will just more. It'll show you things that really aren't actually there in order to give you a complete picture of the world. Okay, even though the world is incomplete. So I'm not going to go into the physiology so much. This is light coming in. It hits the ganglion cells, and finally these rods and cones are the iodopsin and rhodopsin in there. Breaks down into a chemical impulse, electrochemical impulse. The cones are for color vision. They are trichromatic, which means they see things like your computer monitor does, with three colors mixing together to create all the colors of the world. I read a theory that some women have four. They're perceiving four colors, but it was science fiction. I don't know if it's true. Rods give you kind of like a black and white grainy vision of things, and it's like it's kind of true that your rods are your night vision and your cones are your day vision, but they're both used for both. And some people say that, I don't know if this is true, but some people say that like in twilight or like the shifting light where you're kind of using your rods and your cones at the same time, that's one of the places that it's easy to have an accident. All right. So the optic chiasm, your optic nerve comes in and it crosses over. Remember, everything's contralateral. So that means that like this side of the visual field, it's not this eye, this side of the visual field is managed by this side of the head, by this side of the brain. This side of the visual field is managed by this side of the brain. Right. It's not one eye and the other eye, it's actually the visual field, because both eyes see both sides of the visual field. But in terms of which hemisphere will manage that, it's cut off by what side of the world it is. The world is cut in half. It's not cut in half by eyes. Isn't that interesting? And there's a ton of science behind that. I'm not just saying throwing that out there. This is really interesting to me. There's a what pathway and like a where how pathway, and they're handled in different places, right? So part of your vision is trying to figure out what is that thing. And another part of your visual processing is trying to figure out where is it going? Like, what's the significance of this? And partially, like, is that thing going to hit me? And I always think about, like, if you play catch with a baseball is really hard, really dense, and you can throw it really fast. Like, you can throw it much faster than any of our cars typically drive. Like, faster than you would drive your car on the expressway. Baseball can be traveling, right? And we're able to catch these things reliably by reading the arc. And I mean, it's not that big. It's a small little thing. And so reading the body language of the person in front of you, it's not reasonable that you would be receiving visual images and analyzing those visual images with your conscious mind and just thinking, well, I guess now I should put my hand over. There's just not time for that, right? Or think about like Muay Thai. If somebody's standing in front of you and they fake this and they do this instead, how did you react to that? Well, you're almost not aware of how you reacted to it. And that's normally what you do if you're really in a flow state playing a sport, is a lot of times you do something cool and you're like, wow, how did I do that? And the answer is, you, consciousness, don't know, because you, consciousness, did not do it. All right. So there's two theories of color vision, and they're both kind of they're both right. The trichromatic theory explains what happens in the retina, and then the opponent process theory explains the perceptual thing that's happening. And this one, please pause the video if you like, but it asks you to stare at this little white dot here for 30 seconds. Please do this. Please do this. Please pause it right now and stare at the little white dot for 30 seconds. Because it's pixels and not a page, it'll probably happen quickly. But after you do that, then you look at a white wall. You really need to do it for about 30 seconds, at least 30 seconds, stare. And you'll notice that it's actually hard to do. And you got to pause it if you really want to do it right, because I'm going to move on. But it's what you'll see is, like, I think it's the Danish flag, and you'll see that on the wall because of the opponent process theory. You'll see the opposite color. For the black will show you white, the yellow will show you blue, the red will show you green. Right? The opponent process theory. That's what that's called, and that's happening at the level of perception. It's not actually happening in the retina. Okay, so binocular cues show you depth perception, and that basically means if you switch between camera 1 and camera 2, there's a scene in a movie called Wayne's World where he's really happy because he's the girl of his dreams is his girlfriend, and he's happy, and he's like laying in bed with her going, camera 1, camera 2, camera 1, camera 2. It's a really funny scene. But you see that, like, you see very slightly different things. I also learned that people will also have a dominant eye. And if you look through both eyes, and then you look through one eye, and then you look through the other eye, whichever eye has the bigger change is the non-dominant eye. So one of our eyes is even dominant, just like one of our hands is dominant. There are also monocular cues like point perspective. When you see lines converging, that'll show you distance. That's why optical illusions work the way that they do. Colored blindness, right? What are these numbers? 12, 24, 42, right? I have a hard time seeing the 2 of 42. I would like to mess with people by, like, putting one up that's just bubbles and there's actually nothing in there. That would be pretty funny. There's a scene in Little Miss Sunshine where the kid wants to be a pilot so bad, and he finds out that he's colorblind, and then he'll never be a pilot. He's bummed out about that. But that colorblindness is interesting because it's men that are colorblind, and women are almost never colorblind. Okay, so we talked about this. This is the way that hearing happens. The vibrations in the air hit this. They don't know how. They don't know exactly how we perceive pitch. Some of it has to do with, like, maybe this is where it hits the membrane, and maybe some of it has to do with the speed at which the signal arrives. And most people who deeply study sensation believe that it's both. Okay. Yeah, and that explains that as well. So we have, again, some cues about space where it's like, well, this is louder in my right ear, it means it's over here. And then there are also like sounds. This is quieter, and it's coming towards us. The Doppler effect is the sound of something moving by. When something's coming towards us, like you ever hear a like an ice cream truck or something, doo 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 doo, you know, and that if the truck is on the way away, it distorts the pitch, and that's because the pitches are coming and they're moving, right? When a plane is coming, it's like, you know, the sound doesn't actually change as it goes by you, but your perception of the sound changes. Hearing loss. It can happen in a lot of different ways. Some kids are born without hearing and they get cochlear implants. Cochlear implants are interesting because they are a direct connection between a computer and your brain. And they really help some people and they don't help other people. Here's the Black Keys. They're from Ohio. Rock concerts and jackhammers can destroy your hearing by killing the little cilia, the little hair cells in your brain, in your ear, in your inner ear. Taste. There are 5 tastes, and you know the 6th is maybe we perceive fat. This is transduced. Look into it if you like. The gustation or gustatory is the word for taste, and taste and smell are very closely related. Olfaction is smell. Smell goes directly to the memory centers, and they play with this in Black Mirror. There's a time where they try to they have like a little imaging device that'll show what somebody is remembering when they smell something. And this woman has killed somebody, and they're trying to get information about an unrelated case, and she during that case has killed somebody, and they're coming to try to get her to smell this beer because there's a brewery around there, and then imagine what she what thoughts come from this, and the thoughts that come from it are obviously the murder, you know. So this woman witnesses the murder because she can't help but think it, because smell goes directly into the thalamus. It bypasses the thalamus and immediately accesses memories. So smells will remind you of things. Pheromones, this is interesting. Like online dating is probably going to take over the world because Mark Zuckerberg's insight into what you like and who you are, like Facebook and Google together, if they could say, yo, I'm going to find you like an absolute soulmate, somebody who has the same values as you, the same interests as you, the same world outlook as you, and somebody that you're attracted to, because through your browsing history, I know who you're attracted to, and that person will be attracted to you too. The thing that they can't do yet is they don't know the pheromonal compatibility. And there's something very animal about human attraction. There was a study that they did that was really amazing, where they took women and they gave them T-shirts to smell of, you know, like guys' T-shirts, and they said, pick a shirt that you like, you know. I like this one. Oh, I like this one. Just based on smell, you know. And this is conscious. That's really amazing. So then they put them into the wild together. They're on some like dating show, like reality TV dating show. And the people get together based on the woman having pre-selected this guy based on the T-shirt. She'll go find that guy. And this is unconscious because you can't really be like, we're not that, you know, like we're not dogs, right? But we kind of are, apparently, because the women selected in real life, they say, I like this guy. Oh, well, you like this shirt too, 95% of the time or something. And then they looked at the 5% that did not select somebody based on the smell. And they found that these women were on birth control. They were taking a pill that was suppressing their ability to get pregnant. And then when they would get off birth control and be tested again, they would select based on smell again. So there's strong evidence that human beings are attracted to each other based on smell. Isn't that interesting? We're beasts. And they looked deeper into this, and they found out that it's because of immune variability. So like if a woman has strong immune systems against A, B, C, D, but she has weak immunities against E, F, G, and K or something, she will prefer the smell of a man who has the strengths where she will have the weaknesses, presumably in order to create an offspring that has the strongest possible immune system. And so, I mean, that's within the Darwinian paradigm, that makes a ton of sense. And there's a lot of research about this. So the online dating apps are not going to overtake human beings meeting in the wild until they can solve this smell problem. Okay. So that's pheromones. Pheromones are usually, they can send all kinds of messages between animals such as humans, but that they're usually, if you see that word, it usually has to do with attraction. Okay. So there are different kind of touch receptors. There's ones that respond to vibrations and touch, higher frequency vibrations, also touch and pressure. These respond to light, pressure. Ruffini detects stretch, right? And stretch is something that's important if you're throwing something. Your stretch receptors will tell you stuff. If you're lifting something, your stretch receptors will tell you stuff. If you stretch, your stretch receptors, you feel that feeling, that's their stretch receptors. Temperature and pain are a similar thing that I would love to go into deeply, but I will be talking for 3 hours, so I don't want to do that. Pain perception comes from these nociceptors, and it can be pain that's actually giving you information, or it can be neuropathic pain, and that's pain that's not giving you information. That's really annoying. Some people have chronic pain syndromes where they're receiving pain messages, but those messages are not messages of damage. Like, you're not actually hurt. Inflammatory pain is the pain that comes from inflammation, like swelling, and that's why anti-inflammatories are good at reducing pain. They actually do reduce the pain a little bit, but mostly it's through reducing the inflammation. So in some ways, something like Advil actually does fix the problem. Congenital insensitivity to pain. Some people are born with no feeling of pain, and it's actually like a very bad thing, because pain is important information about the world. The inner ear has those little pieces of rice, right? There's one for left, right. There's one for up, down. There's one for spin. It shows you where your head is in space. So if you ever watch a gymnast flipping through the air, they're really in tune with their bodies. They're also really in tune with their inner ears, right? Okay, so that's showing it. The force of gravity on these little pieces of rice shows you what's going on. Proprioception is a feeling of where the body is, and then kinesthesia is the feeling of the body moving. So this is position and this is movement. Those are important. The Gestalt principle is very interesting because it shows you how the human being will always create a whole out of a pattern, and some of that is really, 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 really useful, and some of it is really, really annoying, because whenever you see somebody making up a conspiracy theory or making up a problem out of nowhere, it's because the human being is made to make up stories. That's just what we're made to do. But often we make up stories that are wrong, but that process of reducing complicated reality to a simple story or a complicated story, that's how we have made sense of the world. It's a useful enterprise. It's just that we're so prone to doing it that very often we just make up stories that are just wrong, right? So here's a version of it. You can see the cup, or you can see the people looking at each other, but you can't see the cup and the people looking at each other at the same time. The figure and the ground shift. You're focusing on this as the figure, and this is the background. Now you focus on the faces, the noses, and you see those as the figure, and you see the cup as the background, right? But you can't see them both at the same time. You have to shift. That's figure-ground relationship in Gestalt, right? Here we go. Feeling of proximity. These how many objects do you see here? One group. How many groups do you see here? There's obviously 3 groups. It's not that that's a feature of reality. It's that's a feature of us organizing consciousness. Principle of similarity, right? These are related, and they're related because they're the same color. And this seems obvious to us, but it shouldn't be obvious, because it might not be obvious to an alien. They'd be like, oh, you guys are seeing the difference between the colors, and then you're grouping them that way. And that's your sense making. When I look at this, I don't see individual dots. I see rows. I see the pattern. I see the whole before I see the parts. The parts are kind of meaningless because they just serve the pattern. This one is really similar here, right? You don't see the parts. You see the whole. What's that? It's a circle and a rectangle. You would have to work really hard to pretend, no, I don't see a circle and a rectangle. Oh, I guess that's like a circle and a rectangle. That's straight up a circle and a rectangle. You're a human, you see patterns. That's just the way we're built. But is it really a circle? No, it's not, right? We complete things. We fill in the blanks. And it has helped us so much in our life that we will just do it constantly. My buddy has a coffee shop in Ohio called Duck Rabbit, and it's based on this idea where, like, you can see this as a duck, or you can see it as a rabbit, right? And so here's the mouth over here, and here's the ears over here, or the eye facing that way. So it's a duck and a rabbit at the same time. It's a Duck Rabbit. Duck Rabbit coffee in Cleveland, Ohio. So good, right? It's the only coffee I liked, and it was kind of far away from my parents' house. So there you go. That's perception. And next, we're going to move on to the next chapter. All right. Chapter 6 is about learning. And we're going to focus basically on forms of conditioning, because there are many elements of learning that we're not going to get into directly. There's a whole chapter on memory. I guess I'll just say this quickly. There's a thing called state-dependent memory that you can leverage if you're trying to do some learning. Like, say you have to take an IELTS or some standardized English test, or you're going to take the GRE to get into grad school in Switzerland or something, or like you have to take some really heavy standardized test. So you want to be in the best mental state possible so you can perform as well as possible, and you're going to take practice tests. Well, you should practice the way that you are going to take the test. And this applies also to more interesting things, but for the test, if you take the test, if the test is going to be a 2-hour test, you start a clock, sit down, don't get up, and like take the practice test the same way that you would take the real test. Another thing is, if you know ahead of time that you're going to be taking the test at 8 a.m., take your practice tests at 8 a.m. And the reason is, then you are practicing to be able to retrieve the benefits of practice in the same circadian rhythm that you took the test in. And there's a ton of research, just mountains of research behind this that says that these techniques work. I took a standardized test for psychology, and I didn't use any of these things. I just didn't have time, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would have. But you guys are in student mode. You tend to have time. So if you're going to be taking the test at 2 p.m. and then you find, oh man, I'm usually tired and sluggish at this hour, because some people just kind of crash in the afternoon. You get tired and you want to nap, and you're not going to want to nap during this test. So you should probably push yourself to do the thing at the time you're going to be doing it, right? Okay. And that's true of many other things. Another thing is, if you write something down with a pen, it creates a more powerful memory than if you type it. If you were to create notes for yourself by typing, that does create a memory that's really good, especially if you're not copying things, but you're writing them from your own mind. It creates a powerful memory. But if you write them with pen, it creates a more powerful memory. A lot of students like to do this on iPads, and I don't see any reason that an iPad would be less strong than paper in creating powerful memories. I just personally like paper. Okay. So the chapter opens up talking about the difference between this little sea turtle and this little surfing kid, and talking about how as soon as the sea turtle hatches, it already knows how to do many, many, many different things. It runs quickly to the ocean, avoiding all of the birds that are trying to eat it. When it gets into the ocean, there's a bunch of big fish that are trying to eat it, and it's immediately able to be, like a fully functioning, independent turtle right away. As soon as it comes out of the egg, it's ready to rock. And turtles, it's funny, if you go really far back into evolutionary history, turtles are the same. It's like turtles have been perfect for 1 billion years or something. I'm not sure how long it really is, but it's many millions of years turtles have been exactly the same. They're like, no, we're perfect already. We don't need to evolve anymore. But this kid, there's a bunch of memes about it when, when a puppy is born, that puppy can immediately walk and run around. When a baby is born, it can't do anything. When a puppy is less than a year old, it can already poop outside. And a baby, no, not so much. Potty training is really slow. And then they fast forward to 13, and a 13-year-old dog knows that it's a valued member of the family. A 13-year-old human knows everything. And that one's really funny. The tendency of teenagers to have omniscience. And it's true. It's like something that shows up, and there's probably evolutionary reasons for it, for asserting your wisdom far beyond what it actually is. Dunning-Kruger, right? We'll talk about that later. Okay, so the point is, we have the longest we have the longest period of growing up of any animal. But of course, by the end, our ability to learn serves us the best, and that's why we've taken over the world. But we'll go into development later, so I won't dig into that. But we'll take care of some major effects, major elements of learning in this one. So reflexes are things that are simpler than instincts, and they usually do not require conscious thought at all. And we've talked about that in other chapters. Instincts. Do humans have any instincts? Yes, we do have instincts. And when a baby is born, if you go like this on their cheek, they think that's a breast trying to be given to the baby, and the baby will suck for milk without being needing to be taught to. That's the one thing that we're able to do when we first come out. But we're not able to do much else. There are a few other reflexes that you can test for, but they're not super helpful. Another thing that's really crazy is if you think about as an adult, not a lot of people can do pull-ups. It's not easy for people to do pull-ups, but if you see the finger strength of little babies, how good they are at hanging from stuff, it's really amazing. We are apes. So what is learning? We're going to cover a couple versions of it. A lot of it is conscious, a lot of it is unconscious, and it involves acquiring a skill through experience. Practice is involved in there. Digging into learning, practice, the psychological elements of that for a final project would be a really good idea. Okay, so we're going to cover classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning. Okay. Here's Pavlov. Look at his awesome beard. He was not a psychologist. He was studying dogs, and he noticed that when he would go to feed his dogs, before he would do anything, just when he walks over to grab their food, they would start salivating. They would have the liquid in their mouth would start to come out. They'd start drooling, right? These drooling dogs. And here, does it show you the dogs? Yeah. So this is classical conditioning, right? As opposed to operant conditioning. In classical conditioning, the dog is shown the food, and then the dog salivates, and then they start to pair a response with it. And the way they pair a response with it is they would ring a bell and then give the dog the food, So then the dog gets the bell and the food at the same time all the time. Here they're like, here, let's make sure that this bell doesn't make the dog excited, and he doesn't, right? But here they associate the bell with the food, and then they associate the after conditioning. You don't even have to bring the food. The dog is going to salivate, right? And this is something that if you look at BJ Fogg, Tiny Habits, that's BJ space FOGG, BJ Fogg. He talks about like rewarding yourself for things with coffee. Not coffee, chocolate. There's a Freudian slip, right? I'm thinking about coffee. But if you do something that you want to get yourself to do, like I talk about exercise a lot because it's so good. If as soon as you get done exercising, you give yourself a little bite of chocolate, like something that you like, you'd be like hypnotizing yourself into doing things that are good for yourself. So you can do this to yourself. For sure, you can do this to yourself. It's hard to do that with a placebo. Like you can't really give yourself the placebo effect because you would have to believe in it, but you can give yourself rewards. I've been trying to do that lately because I have a lot of work, and I'll be like, okay, after you finish this job, sit down and play guitar for 15 minutes as like a reward for working so hard. I haven't done it, and so I'm gonna change and try to do that. When I finish this video, I'm gonna be like, yay, I finished my work. I'm gonna play guitar. But that's a really smart way to do things. Like in class, I set you guys up on that 25-minute, 5-minute schedule thing. Part of that is from classical conditioning. It's the idea that like you work super hard for 25 minutes and then you take 5 minutes and you just do something that you want to do away from your computer. Step away from your computer and just do something else. Do something dumb, like hopefully something that makes you happy in some way and makes you feel good and refreshed, and then you come back and sit down. Like I said, this is kind of like psychology of work in general. But for the first 2 hours, you're giving up 20 minutes to the break. That's 5 minutes, four times. I would argue that you're not focused for the entire 2 hours. I would argue that you're not. Some of you maybe are. Some of you maybe are focused for that long. After 8 hours of trying to work like this with like long focus sessions, you're much, much, much better off if you're taking a few breaks. And that's what I'm going to try to put into our live sessions. And I think it's really helpful because not only are you like switching between focused and not focused, which is really important, but you are also rewarding yourself all the time. These rewards are really important. So that's classical conditioning. You can take a picture of this. These are the terms associated with it. I feel like you've already seen this before. And this is the clip, the office clip that we'll watch again together in class is like this, right? Higher order conditioning basically says that you pair something with a conditioned stimulus, and then you condition a second stimulus to be paired with that too, right? Like the example here of the cat. Here's the can opener, and the can opener indicates that the cat's going to be fed. So the cat, hears wah, 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 wah. That's what a can opener sounds like. Comes over, stares, hey, feed me, yay, and then you can see the classical conditioning happen. But what if there's a squeaky cabinet door that you have to open to get the food, and it goes wee? So normally the world sounds like this. Okay, come here, Tiger. And then Tiger, as soon as Tiger hears that cabinet opening, it's like, oh, that's the cat food cabinet. I can hear that. I know what's going on. If you ever have a dog or a cat or something, when they hear the door, they come. My kid, when she hears the little bell on the door, she's like, oh, who's that going to be? And the bell, I mean, it's a meaningful thing. It's how we infer causality, right? So that's second order conditioning. And like I said before, if we get into habits and behavior change later, you can do this to yourself for sure. All right. So yeah, acquisition is getting the conditioning to happen. Extinction is making it go away, and spontaneous recovery is where something that was extinct before comes back. Real simple. So these are the curves. It takes a longer time to acquire a an association, and it's quicker for it to go away, right? And spontaneous recovery, bam, right? Okay. Distinguishing between stimuli is important. That's where an organism will learn that when you hear that wing, ding, 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 that's a can opener. That means I'm going to get fed. But then if you have other loud kitchen stuff going on, like a mixer, a hand mixer, and the hand mixer goes wing, 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 and it sounds a little bit different, then maybe the cat will show up a couple times and be like, oh, what's that? Because the cat is generalizing the stimulus. I hear a loud machine in the kitchen. Does that mean you're making food for me? No. Okay. I'm out of here. And then after a little while, the cat learns to discriminate between the sounds of the different machines and know which one means that it's about to get fed, right? Habituation, learning not to respond to a stimulus that is presented repeatedly without change, right? Seligman, that I talked about before, studied learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is where it's kind of horrible. They would subject these dogs to like electric shocks, and the dogs would learn that like nothing that they do will stop the shocks from coming, and nothing that they do changes anything. And then they just become super depressed because they do not believe that the way that they act in the world has any effect on the world around it. And they've of course generalized Seligman's findings to humans. When we feel like we are taking control of our lives, we feel good. And when we feel like we are not in control of our lives, we feel bad. And it's just a fundamental thing about life forms, I think, because it's something that they found in animals. I know a lot of times people are like critical of animal studies, but I think if you find something in animals and then you also find it in humans, it's really powerful because it means this is something that life forms experience, you know? Like I think that they have made all of these dogs depressed. They look depressed, you know, they look like they're experiencing emotions. And I don't like that. I don't like that research. It makes me sad. As I'm reading this guy's book, I'm like, oh man, I don't like you. That was your career for so long, man. That's terrible. But learned helplessness has taught us a lot about his other passion, positive psychology. How do you live a good life in the world? And it goes back to that Stephen Covey 7 habits of highly effective people. The first habit is be proactive, and that basically means that you take ownership of the mistakes in your life, and you believe as a fundamental thing, I can change my life. I am responsible for my life. I can control my mind. You know, like if you believe that fundamentally, you're good to go. And that's the other thing they find is they're not able to produce learned helplessness in everybody, right? There's a lot of people who have terrible things happen and they take it like a champ because they're tough mentally. Some people are just built like that. And then some people, as soon as there's a problem, they crumble immediately. And I mean, I'm sure that depends on the problem. It depends on the person. It depends on the context. It depends on the day. It depends on a lot of things, right? But that Angela Duckworth from University of Pennsylvania wrote that book, Grit, that was a giant bestseller, talking about how it's not intelligence, it's not learning, it's not any of these other things. It's passion and perseverance. It's being able to work really hard that will get you the real success in the world. All right, let's keep rolling. So John B. Watson was also a jerk. He did this study with little Albert about associations, creating fear in this poor little baby. You show him this funny little mouse and smash some super loud sound behind his head, and then when the baby would see a mouse, would just start crying a lot. It's just really horrible that you would do that. And like, it's very strange that the world didn't know about association so much that like you would need to do that multiple times to a poor little Albert. But I've read some stuff about how little Albert had a terrible life or something as a result of these psychological experiments. There's just one sentence at the end of the section in your book that says, you could never do this today because it's ethically wrong. It's so ethically wrong. It's not like Milgram. The Milgram experiments, they're wrong, but like they were so helpful. So here's little Albert. They made him scared of Santa Claus. They did all kinds of things. And basically what they would do is they'd show him some furry thing and then smash some loud thing behind him. And then that's one of the places they got stimulus generalization, is after a little while they're messing with this poor little kid so much that they think that he, as soon as he would see something furry, he's like, you jerks are going to make this loud noise behind me. So he'd cry anytime he saw anything furry. I'm sure like he grew up and was afraid of the family dog, but there was no evidence that his fear was long lasting. We don't know that, right? Okay. But either way, John B. Watson's a jerk. He was the father of behaviorism. And if you remember, the behaviorists believed that the mind is a black box. Like, we understand its outputs, we understand its inputs. We don't know what's going on in there, though. So we're going to study behavior, because if I'm working with another scientist, we can both see the same thing happening. I don't know what depression is, but I know what negative language looks like, and I know what, like a negative posture looks like, and I know what, negative reactions to things sound like. These are behaviors that I can measure. Me and my scientist friend, we can both see it at the same time, right? So that's why they liked behaviorism, because they're like, we can be scientists about this. We're not studying all this fuzzy cognition or emotion stuff. Okay. So operant conditioning is a little bit different, and it comes from B.F. Skinner. He was the guy that put rats in boxes. There was a rumor about him that he put his kid in a box. He didn't. He apparently made a little thing. He was just a very inventive guy. He made some container for children to be more comfortable or something. It's in the crash course video. I can't remember. So operant conditioning is based on reinforcement and punishment. And there's positive reinforcement, positive punishment. There's negative reinforcement and negative punishment, right? So let's look at reinforcement. Positive reinforcement would mean like, I'm gonna do a workout. When I get done with the workout, I'm gonna eat a cookie because I like cookies. Positive reinforcement. You're positively reinforcing the behavior. Negative reinforcement is like, there's a thing that's annoying, and then I'm going to take the annoying thing away, and that will be the reinforcement, right? It's the best example that I see everywhere is that bing 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 sound when you don't put your seatbelt on. It's annoying, so then when you put your seatbelt on, the annoying thing goes away. So it's using negative reinforcement. It's reinforcing your behavior by taking away something awful, something unpleasant. Positive punishment means adding something bad. They give the example of hitting somebody with a belt. They don't give it as a suggestion of how to punish, but it's adding something. The suggestion in the book is yelling at kids for texting in class. And then negative punishment would be taking something away, usually the freedom to do something, the freedom to watch TV. You usually get an hour of iPad time, but you've been bad, so you don't get that. It's taking something away. It's called negative punishment. The most powerful reinforcer is positive reinforcement, right? And punishment is less effective. So, yeah, there we go. Classical versus operant conditioning. You can see that in the video. Classical conditioning, the subject is not doing something. An association is being made. With operant conditioning, you're waiting for a behavior to happen, and then you either reward or punish that behavior. So that's the difference. Stimulus timing is important. The closer the stimuli are timed, the stronger the association. So that's the Skinner box, right? We talked about this a little bit when we talked about drugs. The rat hits the lever, gets a reward. He repeated this experiment 1 billion times, and sometimes the rat would have to press the lever several times in order to get a reward. Sometimes he would just have to press it once, and then he would get a reward. And they learned a lot about reinforcement schedules, right? Well, every 3 times the rat presses the thing, he's going to get a reward. every time he's gonna get a reward. Oh, now he's only gonna get it during these intervals. And the strongest one they found, there will be a slide about this later, but the strongest one they found is random rewards. I mean, it's seemingly random, like variable. And if you play a game and you go out farming creeps, you're out there in the forest, you're not ready to move on to your next level, so you have to run around and kill stuff and get more experience and more gold or whatever. So you're out there killing stuff. I'm sure when you kill stuff, it doesn't give you the same amount of stuff every time. Sometimes it'll give you 500. Sometimes it'll give you 135. Sometimes it gives you 1,000, and you never know what it's going to be. So you always have this little bit of gambling style excitement that's coming in. That will keep somebody addicted. All games will use this kind of system. It's never like, oh, well, this one's worth 1 point. They're all worth 1 point. That's boring. You don't want everybody to be worth 1 point. You don't want them all to give you 1 coin. That's boring. You have to have a random reinforcement schedule, and that will make your game more addictive. Yeah, so these are positive reinforcements, negative reinforcements. We already kind of talked about these. And these are punishments. We talked about those. Shaping is the process by which, if you want to train a dog, you want the dog to stand up on its back legs and turn around in a circle. Well, first you reinforce standing up on his hind legs, and then you reinforce standing up on the hind legs and kind of turning to the side. You reinforce that, and now step 3: standing up is not enough, turning is not enough, standing, turning all the way around. That's enough. And then before long, you can get your dog to stand, turn around. This is operant conditioning and the process called shaping. It's where you reward successful approximations of a behavior, and then after a little while, you only reward higher level stuff. That's shaping behavior, moving it more towards there by giving rewards, withholding rewards, right? Shaping behavior. Primary and secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcer is something like, food, water, sleep, sex, pleasure. These things do not need to be learned to be desired. A secondary reinforcement would be something like praise, money, tokens that can be exchanged for other things. And these are, you have to learn the value of these things. And if society crumbles, the value of these things don't mean anything anymore. They're secondary reinforcers. The best way to teach a behavior is with positive reinforcement, and there are other ways. Continuous reinforcement is every time. Partial reinforcement, the organism does not get reinforced every time they display the desired behavior. They're reinforced intermittently, and the best version of that is, of course, like I said, variable. And the research is so widespread, you'll almost never see a fixed interval. I mean, you can say for every 10 coffees you buy, we're going to give you a free coffee. And that's kind of a fixed interval reinforcement schedule for being our loyal customer. And that does work a little bit, but this variable, if you can set it up, this is more addictive to people. It's more powerful. All right. Read these if you like. I'm moving on. Yeah. Variable ratio, way more powerful. And gambling runs on that, right? A slot machine. You pull the lever, you get rewarded sometimes. You don't get rewarded other times. It's so ridiculously addictive to people because the excitement of never knowing when it's gonna score. Scrolling is the same thing. It takes the same. It's the same motion as a slot machine, and the thing that's going to show up is random. You don't know if it's going to be a picture of somebody's breakfast or a picture of somebody's cat, or other things I don't care about. But you don't know what's coming next, right? You don't know what kind of dopamine hit you're going to get when you're scrolling. It could be anything. You're leaving yourself up to random things. Cognitive mapping. This is really interesting. This is about latent learning. They put some rats in a maze and they said, okay, we're not going to reward you for anything. Just go around and see what goes on. And they were running around in the maze. And then when they finally started rewarding them for getting through there, they found that the animals that had explored the maze without any rewards were better at getting through it. And the common thing that's generalized from this is like, you should not be learning for a grade. You should be learning for learning. And if you're learning for learning, when it's time to get a grade, you're going to be even better at getting the grade because you did the thing for its own sake. And it's the same thing with art. Like if you're doing art because you love art, you will probably get lots of praise. Maybe you'll get a great career and some money because you're doing it because you love it. And that's the same thing with your job. Like when you guys go start a startup company or you go, like you go into some field or something, you should go into the field where you like to explore it, even with no rewards. Even if you weren't getting paid, you would be down to do this. And if you find yourself in that field, you will be awesome at it and you'll get the rewards because you'll be doing it out of love. You'll always outcompete somebody who's doing it just for the rewards, right? That's basically the moral of this story, is that like rewards themselves are never enough to produce greatness. Somebody who loves what they're doing is always going to outperform somebody who doesn't love it, right? This is the observational model. He's monkey see, monkey do, right? And here's some more observational learning. Sorry. So the social learning theory is basically, it's very true. Like we learn from watching others. This was interesting in the text, this idea of vicarious reinforcement or vicarious punishment. Like when you see somebody doing a behavior and then everybody cheers for them, you're like, oh, that's a good behavior. I want to try to do that. And when you see people doing a behavior and then everybody punishes them and they don't like that person, you're like, oh, I've learned that that's not something to do. Vicarious means I am learning through you, right? Or I'm feeling this through you. Like the reason that you watch a series is you have a vicarious feeling through the character. When your friend becomes very successful, you are vicariously happy, although most people just get really jealous. All right, so this is the Bobo doll experiment, and this is I guess where I'll ask you a straight up question. Bandura at Stanford, before I was born, brought a bunch of kids into the lab, showed them a clown, like this clown that you hit it and it falls down. When I look at that clown, I just think immediately that I want to hit it. It's just so hittable. Manati Jangle, right? That you really want to hit the Bobo doll. And then they show the adult beating up the Bobo, and then they leave, and they put the kid in there, and then the kid beats up the clown too. They give him a hammer to hit it with, and then they're really, wow, look at that. The kid sees the adult doing violence, and then the kid goes in there and does violence. But it's like, there were some problems with Bandura's thing. Bandura is super famous. He's very well respected in psychology. But this Bobo doll thing, I'm on the fence about, and that's because there's kind of two ways of looking at this violent media, seeing violence sort of a thing. A lot of people believe that like violent games and stuff will create violence in society, and this is kind of the monkey see, monkey do theory. Like, look at this monkey over here. He's drinking, so the monkey starts drinking. The monkey see, monkey do theory basically says, when you see people doing violence, it makes you more likely to do violence. If you see sexually explicit material, it's going to make you go out and act inappropriately in sexual ways. Like if you see this thing happening, then you're going to do it. And I don't believe there's no truth to that. There's mountains and mountains of evidence that prove the monkey see, monkey do theory. There's another theory that comes from Aristotle, Freud, Salvador Dali likes this one, and it basically says that human beings are frustrated animals that are living in society. Society is hard. Human beings are animals in that we want food, sex, revenge, power, things like that, and we want them right now. We don't want to be told no. We want to go and get these things that we want right now. But society says no to all of these things that we want. So all this energy builds up in us, and we have to find some way of getting that energy out without violating the rules of society. One of them is I go and I take a gun and I take a computer screen and I kill stuff, or I take a controller and I kill a bunch of stuff and then I feel better, And that is the catharsis model. And that comes from Aristotle, and Freud popularized it. But it's the idea that like the violence in society is inherent because you know, evolution by natural selection says we should be a little violent, you know, like that's we're animals, we're beasts, right? We should have sex and violence on the mind. So, do you believe in the monkey see, monkey do model more, or do you believe in the catharsis model more? You know, you've come to the end of the railroad here. If you believe in one more than the other, you can indicate that in the Google Classroom, and you guys can start an argument about that. Maybe we can talk about that in the live session. All right. So I encourage you to go out, do something fun, and enjoy your life, and go be a human, because whether you believe in the monkey see, monkey do model or the catharsis model, this lockdown thing is not good for human beings. You got to find a way to take care of yourself, make yourself happy. And, you know, this psychology class is a good time to talk about that. If you want to talk about like methods for happiness in the lockdown, we can talk about that in the discussion section too. That's kind of a special project we should all be on together throughout this time. All right. I look forward to seeing you in the live session, and I look forward to reading your comments in the Google Classroom. See you soon. Peace.